Streaming. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the iRacing eNASCAR Pro Invitational Series pre-race show. We never came up with a clever title for this thing. It's been, 5-6 weeks, something like that. We never came up with like a catchy name. But once again, I'm Eric, and I am joined by Rajah Caruth and Jordan Anderson. How's it going, guys? Thank you for being here. This has been a long haul, but it's good to have you guys on the show one last time.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
It's been really cool getting to do this with you guys. iRacing is something that I never would have imagined I would have learned this about. Between Rajah and you and me being able to talk about it, Eric, and fill the fans in, it's been cool to learn about this together and watch what it's turned into. So it's been pretty exciting, and it's hard to believe, man. This is the last one, right?
I guess so, unless something. I mean, fingers crossed. We all want to go back to real racing, hopefully sometime soon. So hopefully. It's kind of bittersweet. We kind of want this to be the last one, but it's also sad because we have had fun doing it. And I know the people watching at home have enjoyed catching up with us every week, every episode. But Raj, it's good to see you again. Thank you for doing this because you've kind of been like the iRacing expert. We brought you in here to give us your expertise, and it's been a lot of fun. So thanks for doing this.
Yeah, it's been a blast, to get into this different type of content creation and talking to fans and answering questions and really just talking about what to expect. I've had a blast and ready to watch them racing today.
Yeah, and speaking of that, we're going to have a lot to talk about because today's final Pro Invitational race is at the famous, historic, every positive adjective you can possibly find in the dictionary, North Wilkesboro Speedway. This is the first time anyone's seen it or raced on it, at least in iRacing, in the simulation. So a lot of unknowns, a lot of kind of big name drivers sort of coming out of the woodworks to race in this race today. So we're gonna have a lot to talk about. Before we get started, though, I do want to plug the Icebox Pickup Throwdown iRacing Truck Series. We ran our third race this past week, and Jordan, I know you had your best finish, top 3 last Thursday night. This Thursday we'll be racing at Worldwide Technology Raceway. So I encourage everyone to check that out. But Jordan, tell us about your third place finish. That was a lot of fun. You came in just behind the hills.
Yeah, man. The meme lords were at work this week trying to break up King of the Hill there with the 3 hills. And before we get too far, I gotta say my funniest moment of the night was Santino Ferrucci was in there, and as most of you guys know, us drivers can talk to each other, and the fans in the broadcast can't necessarily hear it. So Santino Ferrucci goes, "Hey, what's the deal with you Hills? Are you guys all related?" And Timmy goes, "Yeah, Austin Hill's the oldest brother, I'm the middle brother, and Tyler Hill's the youngest." And Santino goes, "Oh man, that's so cool! Can't believe you guys are all related and getting to race each other." So funniest moment of the night. And I think somebody, Ryan Truex, followed that up with, "Yeah, just like Bubba Wallace and Stephen Wallace are brothers as well. Stephen's the oldest." So that was the funniest moment of the night. But it's such a great time, man. Michigan was a cool race. I did my first ever live iRacing green flag pit stop. I probably lost 5 seconds in the process, but I did not miss it and did not speed on pit road. But yeah, top 3 finish, man. I'll take it. Austin Wayne Self brought home a strong top 10 as well that night. Timmy Hill kind of came in and stole the show, but we did have Kyle Busch ran with us. So for Icebox Helmet Coolers, a great night for us. A lot of people tuning into your channel out of the groove, man. It was cool to see that. The guys from Podium Esports did a great job. Gateway this week is going to be a different animal for all of us. We've been at 3 big fast tracks, and just like our guys racing later today going North Wilkesboro, it's a 1 mile kind of a short tracky kind of race that we're going to be expecting next week. So it's going to be exciting, man. It's cool to see the series go. We've got 2 more weeks left in our deal. So if you guys want some more iRacing after this week at North Wilkesboro, you got 2 more races to watch with our series. And it's exciting, man. I really feel like this iRacing deal, it's going to keep climbing. Rajah, you know this, and you've seen it, and you've been a part of it. And Eric, you and I have kind of taken this together and watch it rise. But it's cool to see how much iRacing is growing through the process of this, and I think it's going to keep on going even when real racing returns here in a week or so.
Certainly, yeah. It's always been growing pretty fast. It's had a strong following, but it's really hit the national scene in a major way in the past few weeks. But let's talk about today's race in North Wilkesboro. Let's first talk a little bit about the racetrack, the history behind it, and kind of how it got to the simulated world. Of course, North Wilkesboro Speedway last held a NASCAR event in 1996. There was a Cup race. Jeff Gordon won it. He was the last Cup Series winner there. But the story behind how North Wilkesboro came to iRacing is pretty interesting. It sounds like Dale Earnhardt Jr. in a lot of ways kind of pushed for it. He motivated, kind of rallied the troops over at iRacing, and actually went out there and helped them clean and prepare the track, the real racetrack, to get it prepared and ready to scan, so that iRacing could bring it into the virtual world. But I want to start with you on this, Rajah, because you and I are pretty young. I mean, so we've never raced at North Wilkesboro Speedway. We likely were never going to get the chance. I mean, not that I'm a driver or anything, but we're never going to get the chance to race at North Wilkesboro Speedway. How cool is it that through the power of iRacing, they're able to sort of, in a way, preserve these iconic racetracks for generations?
100%. I'm extremely excited, considering I wasn't even alive when the first Cup race or the last Cup race happened at North Wilkesboro, and so, I'm beside myself to be able to race there virtually. And really big props to Dale Jr. Using his avenue, his name, and his popularity really to help iRacing be able to go to North Wilkesboro, go to Nashville, go to Hickory, and get those tracks replicated on the virtual side of things. Just because you'll have guys like me that again weren't alive when last time NASCAR was there. So I'm truly really excited, and really excited to see who's good today. I got a couple ideas in mind.
We'll definitely get to picks a little bit later on, so stay tuned for that, everyone watching. Jordan, you've been racing in real race cars for a while now, but I don't believe you've raced at North Wilkesboro either in real life. So what does it mean to you to get the chance to make some laps at this racetrack eventually?
I think it's an amazing thing that Dale Jr. and Steve Myers and everybody at iRacing has done to bring North Wilkesboro back to life, really. I've gone and raced at Bristol. First time I went there was in 2007. And you drive by the old North Wilkesboro Speedway there on 321 on the way to Bristol when you get off of 77. And you can see, actually, I believe it's turns 1 and 2. You can see from 321 as you drive by, and it just it looks like it's overflowing with so much history. And you hear all the stories. And, I was a huge fan of Junior Johnson's life when he came through the sport, his career, and reading up on him. And North Wilkesboro was they talk about racing and NASCAR and its moonshine history and everything that comes along with it. And that was kind of all created and grew up in North Wilkesboro. So to see these guys really take this little pocket of time and bring it to life for guys like Rajah, who's young. What year were you born in anyway? What year?
2002.
Man, I was 91, man. You making me really feel old, but it's so cool because we talked about last show, how can we save the history of the sport? And North Wilkesboro is such a big part of the history of the sport. And now Rajah and guys that, and I never even really got to go watch a race there. I was, I think, 5 when the last race was held, and it's going to give guys like us an opportunity to go back and run this track. And we talked about last week Texas World Speedway or Riverside, potentially bringing these tracks back. I grew up on NASCAR 2003, and a lot of guys kind of recreated some of those tracks on there. So I hope this is something that iRacing is continue to do, is bringing tracks back to life, that kind of like what Dale Jr. has on his car this week, Lost Speedways, bringing those places back to life. And I think this is just another opportunity for iRacing to just continue to grow, because I love it, man. It's I'm a huge history buff in our sport, and being able to go back and run a place like North Wilkesboro is cool. And I love the fact, looking at how they recreated it, they kind of saved the worn down look of it. I mean, the paint's chipping off the wall, the grass has kind of grown on the guardrail. It kind of has that weathered look. So when you hop out there, it feels like you're running at this place kind of as it sits. So I think they did a really great job with it. And from what I hear, they got the track surface pretty good to where it's going to be worn down, and tire wear is going to be a pretty big factor in the race today, from what I hear.
That's awesome. And I was looking at images a second ago. They even got some of the the old school vintage sign work on the walls and stuff, like old Coca-Cola stuff and everything. So it's pretty cool. They did an excellent job from all the stuff I've seen so far. Obviously, we'll see it in full-on racing action earlier today. You talked about other racetracks that might be getting that maybe could benefit from this technology and also be preserved in a sense. We were talking before we went live, but it sounds like Hickory, which obviously is still open, still runs plenty of races, but doesn't have any NASCAR races there right now. It sounds like they are getting possibly a boot into the simulation as well. So that's another historic racetrack for sure that will be able to be preserved for a long, long time. So that's all really exciting. So North Wilkesboro today, it is a short track. It's known for being one of the great short tracks from the early days of NASCAR. It's a 0.625-mile racetrack, 14 degrees of banking, located just north, of course, of Charlotte, North Carolina, kind of northern North Carolina. Anyway, so today's race, going over some of the brief stats, the format, how it's going to work. It's going to be 160 laps around the racetrack. Every driver is going to be allowed one reset. The top three from last week, Byron, Christopher Bell, and Timmy Hill, are going to start last. Now, William Byron is not on the entry list that I have seen, so he will not be racing, but Bell and Hill will start in the back. Top 10 qualifiers will be inverted at the start. And of course, someone was asking in the chat earlier, the race will be live at 3 p.m. Eastern time, just after we get off the air here with this live stream on Fox FS1, Fox Sports app, all that great, amazing stuff. So before we get into like picks, and we take, of course, fan questions later on in the show here, I want to talk about the entry list a little bit, because there are a few pretty big name race car drivers on the list. You kind of knew that North Wilkesboro, being such a historic, iconic name in itself, it would attract some of these star drivers. But it is noteworthy. All four of the current Hendrick Motorsports drivers, as well as all three of the Penske drivers and Matt DiBenedetto, so I guess that's four total, are not going to race today. So before I talk about the other drivers, I want to ask, I'll start with you, Rajah. Why do you think that is? Do you think those guys are just focused on Darlington since real racing is only about a week away? Or are you surprised that some of those teams are just kind of taking the week off?
I'm honestly, some part of me is a little bit surprised, and realistically, I'm not really surprised, just considering, you know, the amount of prep that has to go on from a driver's side of things in terms of making sure you're physically apt and making sure your eyes and stuff are ready to go, because there's no practice, there's no qualifying. When on May 17th, your first laps are going to be wide open in the turn one of Darlington. So I can 100% expect everybody to, you know, be preparing for that race, and not really all a surprise, you know, Blaney and them guys, you know, aren't running today.
And what about you, Jordan? Were you surprised at all? You're actually obviously in the real driver's seat for these NASCAR race weekends. Are you surprised that some of those guys, as well as I think Kurt Busch, the Ganassi guys, obviously Kenseth wasn't doing it already, but some of them are also not racing today. Is it just about preparing? I mean, they're only a week away.
Yeah, I think looking at the entry list here, my favorite addition is John Wood is come out of retirement to drive the 21 car for the Wood brothers today. So it is interesting to see that the Hendrick guys are out, especially we talked about the dominance that the Hendrick guys have had between Byron and Bowman, really racking up the majority of the wins through the series. So that's kind of interesting to see. But, you know, I can definitely understand with Darlington coming up in Charlotte, these guys are spending time in the simulators and they're trying to get practice. And like Rajah said, making sure they're rested. They're probably at the shop getting in their cars fitted, making sure their seats are ready to go. Because you got to think that these teams have been shut down for almost, we're almost going on a month and a half, 2 months now. So these drivers are probably going to have to be going in their shops to get fitted in different seats and make sure the seat belts are right, pedals are right, steering wheel location's right. I mean, so this is NASCAR's back. I mean, so they're back in the shops trying to make sure all that stuff's ready. So I can understand that those guys are probably making that a priority with what's going on. And who knows, with it being Mother's Day weekend, this is probably those guys' last weekend off for quite a while. So it's going to be pretty crazy when these guys get back. But even still, I mean, we've got some big names in here, some guys that are going to be fast. I think it's going to be interesting because this kind of is coming out. This is new. So, you know, we've talked about the advantage that guys like Timmy Hill has had. And even like with Garrett Smithley that's been out there, he's in the field today in the 51 car. The advantage they've had at these tracks because of all the laps they've run on iRacing. They understand the tire wear, the tire model. Today's kind of a curveball. These guys don't have the experience that they would have had normally at other tracks where they know how the tire degradation is going to work out, how these tires are going to wear out, what's going to happen. So I'm kind of interested to see if we maybe have a dark horse or somebody that we wouldn't expect to only run good, take advantage of this new track and new surface to come out and put on a show and come home with a win today.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of those newer names to the list. You mentioned John Wood. That was one of the drivers I was going to get to. Kind of surprising. Were you surprised at all to see that, Jordan? See him in the 21 car, of course.
I love his tweets, so I'm sure that he's going to probably like be iRacing and like live tweeting on his phone as the race is going on. So I look for some great content to come out of the Wood Brothers Twitter account today. So I think it's cool. I see Jeff Gordon is back on the entry list. Jeff and Bobby Labonte, I believe, are the only two guys looking at our entry list that actually raced in the last race that took place at North Wilkesboro. I think it was the first Union 400 that last ran there. So I know Jeff has won at North Wilkesboro in real life in the past, back in his number 24 DuPont Chevrolet. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can take that real world experience and translate it over to, like Raj was talking about. I don't think I'm looking at some of the younger guys that are on the entry list. I don't think Cole Custer was born at the time the last North Wilkesboro race took place. So I think it's going to be cool to see kind of the old and the new clash together today. And it's something that in this whole project, I know Dale Jr. has been really passionate about. His guys at Dirty Mo Media put together an amazing video documenting this process of cleaning the track and getting all this stuff ready. And I think Rajah talked about putting out this content that's been part of this iRacing journey. And I think that's so cool to let fans see how passionate Dale Jr. was about this process and being able to bring it, to life into iRacing. So this whole project has been cool. I give Steve Myers and the entire iRacing crew big kudos on making this all happen and actually getting this done so quickly. I mean, it was just a little while ago they started this project, so it's been cool to see the process and to now it's finally happening.
Yeah, it has been kind of a pretty quick turnaround since I believe they only scanned the track. Was it December of this past year? So just less than 5-6 months since this whole process began. But pretty freaking cool, I must say. Now you mentioned some of those big names. Dale Earnhardt Jr. is racing today in kind of a throwback looking car. I mean, kind of an old school. It's obviously the sponsor is his new show on NBC streaming, so Peacock, about a old NASCAR racetracks. Of Jeff Gordon, of course, is running his Rainbow Warrior paint scheme. We've seen it all a million times, but of course that's the paint scheme he won the final North Wilkesboro race in, so that's pretty cool. Bobby Labonte is running his old Interstate Batteries looking 18 car, so a lot of cool old school paint schemes. And you mentioned, yes, Jeff Gordon and Bobby Labonte are the only two drivers in today's field who have raced a cup race at North Wilkesboro. Will that give them any sort of advantage? I like what you said, though, about guys like Timmy Hill, Garrett Smithley, who are always really good at iRacing. They've run lots of laps at all these racetracks. With it being a brand new track, does this sort of even the playing field? I'll turn to you on this, Rajah. Do you think the playing field is pretty even today, since some guys have more iRacing experience, but obviously the track is a complete unknown to pretty much everyone?
I think, like you said, it'll definitely even things out, especially considering nobody has the really laps on the virtual version. I'm not sure how much practice in terms of when the track was available to the drivers today.
True.
If they've had an hour, if they've had since last night, so I definitely think it evens it out, especially considering, like Jordan said, Cole Custer wasn't alive. I'm not sure, if any other rookies are in the race. I think, Jeff and Bobby and, Martin Truex, even though he didn't race at North Wilkesboro, still he kind of has that idea of I definitely think he has that idea of how races there went. And I'm really excited. And I think things will be opened up, and we'll get some good racing in.
And actually, speaking of Martin Truex Jr., before we move on, I noticed, he's on the entry list this week. This is his first, if I'm not mistaken. I think this is going to be the first iRacing event of any kind we've seen him in since this hiatus began. Expectations, Jordan, what do you think of Martin Truex today? Do you know anything about his sim experience? Do you think he's going to be competitive? Oh, did we lose Jordan? Jordan, do you got me?
Yeah, I lost into your question there. What'd you say?
Oh, apologies. I hope the stream didn't die. No, we're good. Okay, cool. I was asking with Martin Truex Jr., this being, I believe, his first race of this in the series. Do you expect him to run well, be competitive?
It's kind of something interesting. I think he picked some good timing out. The Hendrick guys are out. The Penske guys are out. The picking's good for him to hopefully come in and make a good showing. So, I know that Martin Truex was really big in DNP when Junior had it going back on NASCAR 2003. So I don't know how much iRacing experience he's got. I know he's on there a little bit, but I think if his NASCAR 2003 experience carries over, he had a lot of laps on there. I mean, I remember watching videos and documentaries of him running with those guys back in the day. So we'll see how well that carries over for him. And I don't even know what kind of rig he's got. So it's going to be interesting. I know that a lot of those guys have gotten fired up about it. So hopefully Martin Truex comes out and puts a show on for us today. He's going to probably be one of those guys like you don't hear about in the entire race, and then probably 10 to go, it's all of a sudden he comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, just suddenly he's fifth, and you're like, oh, well, there he is. There's
right, exactly.
Yeah. Someone mentioned in the chat, Zayer says he raced in the replacements race on Tuesday night. I didn't see that race, so maybe he did. Rajah, you're saying yes, so I guess he does have some laps in this week, so he's hopefully a little bit loose for the race today. What do you think from Martin Truex Jr., former Cup champion? How's he going to run today?
Yeah, I think he's honestly, not talking about our picks yet, but he's somebody I've been keeping an eye on. Him running the replacement race. I believe those are street stocks at Rockingham. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
Mhm.
this past Tuesday, and like you said, Jordan, Martin's been on sim racing in general since Hamlin and Junior back in the day. So if I don't know if you've seen that clip, but him and Junior in that old Busch race talking about Talladega BR, and things like that. I think that Martin Truex is definitely going to be someone to watch out for today. And I feel like, especially since he was there really to begin with, in terms of kind of understanding how NR worked, and a lot of the same characteristics are somewhat replicated in iRacing. So I think he'll still be competitive, and I think I'm ready to go.
Yeah, it's exciting to see another top guy from the NASCAR Cup Series jump into the series and hopefully run well. So before we get to the fan questions point of the show, we have over 300 folks watching at home, so we want to get to your questions very quickly, know what you guys want to hear us talk about. Since this is likely going to be the last stream we do during this Pro Invitational, I want to kind of ask the two of you guys a little bit just big picture. We've done 6 races, I believe. William Byron's won half of them. We've seen some different faces that we're not used to seeing race up front on Sunday, up near the front. I want to ask each of you, I'll start with you, Jordan. Who would you say has been the biggest winner, or who has gotten the biggest boost? Which driver during this Pro Invitational?
I go with Timmy Hill. I think Timmy has really jumped on, taking advantage of his iRacing experience. He's done well. He had his win at where was it, Texas, that he did so well with, and his fans have really gotten fired up. And I know he's probably going to carry over some of the sponsorship. I know he's had Roof Claim has been on his car for quite a few races, and probably carry over some of that sponsorship over to his real life truck and his Cup team with Carl Long's NBM team when they get back going. So I think Timmy is your big winner if you want to talk about eyeballs, impressions, his social media following. I know he's had a lot of great success there. And I would say another guy that's done a really good job is William Byron. He's delivered every week with a solid performance. And I think that William kind of came into the sport. He was one of the first kids that really grew up. I call him a kid. One of the first guys that kind of came into the sport that got his start on iRacing. He did iRacing, legend cars, late models. He kind of moved up from there, and everybody kind of heard about how good he was. And then he kind of showed up and delivered and said, "Hey, look, I'm here. This is all the experience I've got. I'm gonna prove it." So I think those two guys are the ones that stick out in my mind. What do you think, Rajah? What guys stood out to you through this whole process that you thought were really good, that delivered really good performances every week?
100%, definitely Garrett Smithley and Timmy Hill, along with Landon Castle. Those 3 guys cumulatively, with Landon Castle working with Blue Emu, Timmy Hill with Pitbox Grills, and Garrett Smithy with that broker company. I think those guys, like you said, will be able to bring that sponsorship dollars and those partnerships to the real life side of things. And who knows, maybe at the Xfinity race at Daytona in July or August, Timmy and Garrett can run good with JD, and I think it's Carl Long that runs the MBM stuff. So I think those 3 guys in particular have really been taking advantage of this as a whole, in terms of to build their brand, build their name, and to get people that aren't into necessarily racing or into sim racing or are new to racing in general, to partner with them and just build who they are.
Definitely. It's, I think, one thing funny to touch on too is Dale Jr. already had his popularity in the sport going into this whole iRacing thing. But I think because of his involvement in North Wilkesboro and so many other things, I think Junior's kind of solidified himself as the godfather of iRacing this whole process. He's like the Dom when it comes to online racing. So I think it's cool to see how involved he still is, and that's what we really need right now, is a guy that's as prominent as Junior to really get behind iRacing right now. So I think he's done a great job on his end too.
I agree. I definitely. I was gonna. You guys did a good job mentioning a lot of the drivers who kind of were in the background beforehand that have kind of taken a big step forward. But Dale Earnhardt Jr. I'd also say Denny Hamlin has done a decent job of handling this thing. Obviously, winning the first race of the series was a big boost to him. But then also this deal with his daughter turning off the TV. He's played the social media game very well.
Channel gate. We'll call it a channel gate.
Yeah, I'll say Alex Bowman as well has done a good job. I've noticed him on social media. He started the trend of blaming your pet for your failures in the sim. So as far as social media media goes, I think a lot of the veterans, I've seen a lot of their personality come through in ways that I really never had, at least not in recent memory. So that's been really exciting, I think, for a lot of fans to see and kind of relate to drivers in different ways. But yeah, it certainly has been a lot of fun. Well, we're at that time of the show here where we're going to turn to the live chat. We have 340 people watching, according to what YouTube is telling me, which sometimes it lies. But what questions do you guys have for anybody on our panel here? Jordan Anderson, of course, I keep going this way. You're this way. You're on my screen. You're over here. Jordan Anderson, Rajah Caruth, do you guys have any questions? Even for me, if you have a question for me, I don't have any answers. So want to hear what you guys have. Here we go. Fish Productions. First question I see. In the theme of today's race, what are you guys' favorite paint schemes from the 1990s? We'll start with you, Jordan, since you were alive then.
I think of the 90s, I would say that it's cool to see anytime you see the rainbow DuPont Exalta colors come back to life is always pretty cool. And to see Bobby's Interstate Batteries paint scheme from his championship winning year is pretty cool. And I think that John Wood is running a tribute paint scheme to Marvin Panch on his Wood Brothers car today with Poncho riding on the door there. So it's not a 90s paint scheme. It's back from probably the 60s, but that's still pretty cool to see. What do you think, Rajah? Who's got your favorite paint scheme today?
So luckily, I'm a big diecast person, getting accumulating stuff, as I go to races and go to, places around the country, really. And not being alive in the 90s, having to read in the history books and watch races on YouTube. I got two paint schemes here that, I've liked and had a liking to for a while. This is the one of Dale Jarrett's Ford cars from, I believe, 99. And this is one of my schemes that I've loved. Along with the I believe this is one of Dale Sr.'s All-Star Race Bass Pro Shop cars. So those are two paint schemes really from the 90s that, I've liked seeing, pictures of in history books, seeing some of the content that RCR has done and be able to see them cars. And going to their museum, I went to their museum last year and seeing some of the cool Dale Sr. paint schemes that they've had. Those are, some of the cars that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, 90s definitely had a lot of great paint schemes. Chevrolet Cup Series asked, what was the best race from the Pro Invitational? I'll start with you on this one, Rajah. What's been your favorite race so far?
In terms of overall racing product, I probably will have to say either Homestead or Talladega. I think, those races were a good match, I think, between, pure pandemonium and crashes to actual competitiveness and racing, especially with Junior and Hamlin at the finish of Homestead and, Talladega having pack racing coming to the finish. How about you, Jordan?
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. Homestead was my favorite by far. Seeing those guys drag race off of turn 4 to come to the end. So my favorite is Homestead, but it may change depending on how today's race goes. How about you, Eric? Which one was your favorite through all these?
I kind of agree with most of what you guys saying. Homestead was probably my favorite finish just because of watching Hamlin Jr. carve through the top 5 there and obviously side by side for the finish. But overall, I actually thought Talladega was my favorite. Also watching the broadcast from home, it felt honestly the most like a real Talladega race, and I thought that one also had a great finish as well and a lot of fun storylines. But I think the only like bad race was Bristol because it was just so chaotic and it just really had no flow to it. Other than that, I feel like they've all been net positives in my opinion. Let's see, I had a question, I lost it. Where did it go? Someone said, what's your opinion on pickles? People always asking us about food.
Hey, I got a question. It may not be a fan question, but tell us, how was your interview with Matt Kenseth? How cool was it? How did it come about? I'm curious. I know Matt's not in the race today, but you got to tell us what's the background story on how you got that all put together.
Sure. So I'm a big Matt Kenseth fan, and when it was announced that he was coming back, I knew that this might be my one and only final chance to get him on the show because he's not a big media guy. Since he's been retired, I think he's been on like one podcast, and it was like with Kyle Petty a year ago. So I knew this was my last chance. So I immediately sent out emails to the couple people I knew who might be close to the situation and might be able to make something happen. And really, it was all them. They were able to get in contact with Chip Ganassi Racing and made it happen. And it was I was definitely nervous. I've had the great pleasure of getting to meet a handful of race car drivers like yourself, Jordan, over the past year or two, and but no one made me as nervous, but also the most comfortable because Matt Kenseth is a very mellow guy. So when he gets into that Zoom call and you have to kind of channel, I found myself quickly kind of toning myself down. I was able to easily relax because he was so. Hi, Matt Kenseth, driver of the number 42 Chevy, like that. So I was like, okay, I can tone it down a little bit. I can relax.
That's nice.
So it was cool. It was really cool. But I'm glad people enjoyed it, and it was definitely surreal. Here's a super chat actually from Chris Cahill in Canadian dollars. So we have our friends from north of the border here. What historic short track would you like the Trucks to go to? We'll start with you on this, Jordan.
Man, that's a good question, and that's been a pretty hot debate amongst a lot of fans here the last couple of years about wanting to see more short tracks. So which one would they pull in there? I got to say, two that I've raced on that I would actually like to see would be Five Flag Speedway down in Pensacola. Place is just worn out, rough as get out. That would be fun. Of course, I don't know how well it would do if you added safer barriers to it, because you almost hit the wall off of turn 4 every time you run there. And then Nashville Speedway there in Tennessee, super fast track. A lot of amazing history there with our sports. So those would be two that I would like to see there. Of course, it's hard to stop there at that list. I mean, you go back and look at the Busch Series and Truck Series when it first came out, and there's a lot of good tracks on the West Coast. I mean, you can go all the way up to Evergreen Speedway. A lot of great racing up there. So, but I think Nashville would be my number one, and then Five Flags would be second right there.
Are there any tracks you would add to that list, Rajah?
Probably just Myrtle Beach. That having only my only big car experience there, I love that track, and it's a great area as well. So, like you said, it would be very interesting to see how safer barriers would make that exit off 4, especially running side by side with people. So, definitely add Myrtle Beach to that list, and that's really it. I've had to watch a lot of those older races online because I again wasn't alive. So, I just more short tracks.
Yeah, for sure. I found the question I was looking for earlier. I think you might have answered this one, Jordan, but it's been a while, and I know a lot of people are always interested to hear how hear a lot of these kind of fun details about drivers and their teams. But from TA Gaiman, he asks, why did you choose the number 3 for your truck?
So long story behind it, there was quite a process involved with it. When you start a team or you go race in NASCAR in the Truck or Xfinity Series, you fill out your owner license and they send you a form that is basically asks for your number. What's your first pick, your second pick, your third pick. So the first number that I asked for was number 2, which was going to be paying homage to Mark Martin when he ran the number 2 back in the ASA series. That was taken. You had Cody Coughlin was running for GMS. They got the 2 with Jag sponsorship that year, so we lost out on that. My second pick was to go for the number 7, Alan Quickie. Corbin Forrester got that one with the start of his new team as well. And so I finally said to the girl that was helping me with NASCAR at the time, I said, can you just email me a list of what numbers are available so I don't take up any more of your time? And so she sent me a list of about 20 numbers. And the 3 was on there. I was like, man, that's really cool. There's a lot of history tied to Earnhardt, but not so much in the Truck Series. But what really drew me to the number 3 was Junior Johnson. When Junior was an owner driver back in the Cup Series, he drove the number 3, white with red numbers. We actually got to do a throwback to it back in 2018. But when I was in college at Belmont Abbey in Charlotte, North Carolina, I read a story called The Last Great American Hero by Tom Wolfe that followed and kind of covered Junior Johnson and his life and what made him such an American hero. And that story just kind of stuck with me. And I thought about that. I was like, man, how cool would it be my first year as owner driver to be able to honor a guy like Junior Johnson? And sent in our form application for the 3, it got approved, and the rest was history. And we unveiled it there. And was pretty cool to carry that number that has a lot of history in our sport for sure. And I know Mike Skinner had a lot of history, and Jay Sauter and those guys ran that number back in the day in the Truck Series. But long story short, Junior Johnson and the 3 is how we end up with that number.
Well, it's definitely I love the font y'all have chosen. I love all the paint schemes. It looks great out on the racetrack. It always has. So that's really awesome. Well, I appreciate you answering that one. Stephanie asks, what is your favorite track to watch or to race at? We'll start with you on this, Rajah. What's your favorite track to watch?
I guess I'll do it into 2 things. Out of pure entertainment purposes, in terms of pack racing and really just chaos. The Roval is probably up there in terms of just seeing and especially you don't like tearing up cars, but seeing the crazy restarts going into the little left-hander in turn 1. I think the Roval's up there in terms of for entertainment purposes, and really just overall for watching good racing. I have to say Martinsville. I'd love that track to death. From playing it on console games to really working on it on the sim, and hopefully be able to race there in real life one day. Martinsville has probably been my favorite track.
What about you, Jordan?
In person, I grew up going to Darlington, so that place there is why I fell in love with the sport. I remember sitting in the grandstands outside of turn 4 there as a kid, and used to love watching races there. We got to go to some races there as a kid and just fell in love with the place. And as far as TV, if I could sit down on a couch and say I want to watch a good race, I would probably say Atlanta and Pocono would be two that always provide some good racing. Atlanta, just because, tires get worn out. You guys got running the top against the wall, the middle, the bottom, guys searching all over the place for grip. And Pocono, just because it's unpredictable. It's the tricky triangle. You always see guys like going in the front stretch trying to snake the draft or lose a guy behind them, or guys going through the grass in the backstretch. I think it's paved now on the backstretch, but there's bumps down there. It kind of reminds you how, the backstretch at Charlotte used to be in the 90s. You see cars going down the backstretch like this. There's some spots on Pocono where you kind of get that same vibe and feel from it. So Atlanta and Pocono would be the two ones that I like to watch on TV.
Certainly fun ones. I've always loved watching Bristol. It doesn't really matter if it's old Bristol, new Bristol, Bristol from like 7 or 8 years ago when they first put the progressive banking in. I've always had a soft spot for Bristol. We'll try to take one or two more questions. Here's one from T-Ballman33. For Jordan, how did you get into NASCAR, and what advice would you give to a person who's also looking to get into NASCAR?
Yeah, so I knew from the time I was probably 7, 8 years old that I wanted to be a race car driver, and told my mom and dad that, and they thought I was crazy. They said, yeah, you can go be a race car driver and be a spaceman and a cowboy and just go after it. But the biggest thing I would tell anybody, whether it's going to be a race car driver or whatever it is, just set your mind to it and don't ever give up. Life isn't going to be easy. There's going to be challenges along the way, and both you guys can certainly appreciate that, I'm sure, but you just got to stick to it, and perseverance is key. You got to show up every single day and keep fighting for that goal and that dream, and put in the hours, the effort. You got to learn your craft, learn what it takes, the ins and outs. I did go-karts. I started out in the WK series, ran Bandoleros after that, did legend cars. For whatever reason, I jumped in and ran dirt late models for 2 years. So it was completely out of my element there, but it was good. I learned a different culture, a different style of racing. Jumped back into super late models on asphalt, and ran 2 K&N races, tried to get my NASCAR license as quick as possible, and made my Truck Series debut at Phoenix back in 14. And 102 races later, still running strong in the Truck Series. So been quite a journey, but if you're a driver out there, I'd say go to some go-kart races, see if your family or mom and dad can take you out there, learn as much as you can about go-karts, get started there, and then just try to learn about your local races. Just if no matter where you are in the country, go to a local race, whether racing street stocks or late models, and make friends with teams. Most guys that are racing, weekly shows, if you come up and show interest in them, those guys are going to give you their time and help you any way they can. And even if it means starting out volunteering, working in their cars and learn as much as you can. Just show up every day, fight for it, learn as much as you can, and never give up. So that's my spiel there.
I think that's great advice in a lot of ways, even outside of racing, just any type of career or industry you want to break into, for sure. Well, I'm sure everyone in the chat appreciates that. A bunch of questions are asking about picks now, so we'll probably get to that here in a second. But we do have one final super chat from Chris again. What makes Darlington so historic and unique? We've been talking about North Wilkesboro, but Chris wants us to talk about Darlington. You mentioned that's the track you grew up going to, Jordan, and seeing a lot of races at. Also, I know a lot of people in the chat were giving you grief for Pocono. They were surprised to hear someone likes Pocono. But yeah, I guess what makes Darlington so historic and exciting for you?
You think about the Rebel 400, and I think when I was growing up, it was the Trans South 400, and Darlington always had the 2 races there, and for me as a kid in the 90s, you had Jeff Burton and Mark Martin and Jeff Gordon, all the races there. But you think about I think one of the first guys that wrecked and went out of the track at Darlington was Cale Yarborough back when they had guardrails. He thought I think he quoted back then, he thought he was going to the moon. He straight up cleared the racetrack. But the coolest story I ever heard about Darlington was one of the first races they held there. Drivers and teams were actually going to cars in the infield and taking cars off of passenger vehicles, stealing the tires off those cars and putting them on the race cars just so the cars could finish the track. That's how abusive the surface was back then. And that's where the Lady in Black, Too Tough to Tame, that's where those nicknames came from. And that track has certainly lived up to those nicknames every single year when these teams show up. So a lot of history there. A lot of guys, made their names at Darlington just because it was such a tough track. They always said that if you could tame that place, you could pretty much go win and race anywhere. And if you remember back when Danica Patrick first came in the sport, that's where they had her go, was Darlington first. They just wanted to throw in their deep end and go for it. And that's where a lot of guys have gone. When they run good at Darlington, they're going to probably run good at other places. So I think that's probably why that place has gotten that nickname and is so tough to conquer. You've run it a lot on iRacing, Rajah. Is Darlington probably up there as one of the toughest tracks that you've run at on the sim?
Definitely. I love that place. I really hope that they do some little things, because the last time they had scanned it, I believe, was 2008. So it's definitely not as rough as it is right now. So with that being said, it's still really a really rough surface. And I love, like you said, love watching races there, and being able to compete on it, and spend laps and laps on there on the sim side of things. I love the track, and being on my schedule for later in the season on the sim side of things. That track's awesome. And it's just history, man. It's awesome.
Darlington is awesome. It's exciting that that's going to be the first race that the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series race here in just about a week and a half when we get back to real racing. Well, thank you everyone in the chat who sent in questions. We tried to get to as many as we possibly could. I tried to find some that we hadn't talked about in past episodes because we've been doing a few of these. We've answered a lot of questions, and I think you guys have a really good idea now of where Jordan Anderson comes from, how he got into racing, Rajah as well, his experience in real race cars and in the sim. So we appreciate all of you guys sending in your questions over the last few weeks. That's been a lot of fun. But now it is time to wrap this episode up with our predictions, our picks for today's race. We already went through some of the big name drivers, some of the new faces in the series this week, but there's also a lot of regulars. No William Byron, so the low hanging fruit perhaps is no longer on the an option. But I'll start with you, Rajah. Who is your pick to win today's race at the iconic North Wilkesboro Speedway?
Man, that is tough. For one pick to win, I'll have to pick two guys that I think will be one to watch out for. Obviously Jeff Gordon, being a part of the Fox broadcast, and having, I believe, like Casey Kerwin and Jimmy Mullis at the Fox studio, and giving them tips and tricks, and giving him and Boyer tips and tricks on how the sim works, and some parallels between that and real life. I think Jeff is going to be one to beat today, especially racing at North Wilkesboro in particular, along with Martin Truex. I think, especially getting some bump in at the replacements race earlier in the week. I think Truex is going to be up there too.
I like it. Jordan, how about you?
I've got to go with the guy that I was talking about is now the godfather of iRacing. My pick's going to be Dale Jr. today. I'll be pulling for Junior Nation, hopefully making some fans happy with that pick. And my reasoning behind it is just we talked about earlier and discussed his involvement with the scanning of the track. I'm sure that they had him as their test driver in the process as they were building the track. They had to have somebody that could basically go out and say, hey, yeah, this feels right. This looks right. I'm sure Junior is that guy. So he may not talk about it or say it, but I'm sure he's got a bunch of laps around that place that nobody else has. So look for Junior Day. And I love his paint scheme. He's got that number 8 throwback, kind of an homage to his grandfather, Ralph Earnhardt's car that he raced back in the day. It looks cool, man. I love the white with the throwback red 8 on there. So look for him to be strong, and I think he's going to be your winner today. But I'm also going to think that Bobby Labonte is going to be up there battling too. But I think Dale Jr. is going to be our winner after it's all said and done today.
Yeah, Dale Earnhardt Jr. was going to be my pick as well, and I like what you said about his paint scheme. It looks great, especially it matches the walls and stuff at North Wilkesboro Speedway. It really looks like it was designed for that race, which I mean it probably was. But that's a great Dale Earnhardt Jr. is a great pick. I do like Bobby Labonte as well because he's kind of been the surprise performer in a lot of the past Pro Invitational races as well. But I don't want to count out Kyle Busch. I think it would be shocking if he ran all of these iRacing races across all these different disciplines for all these weeks and didn't get some sort of high-profile win somewhere. So don't count Kyle Busch out as well. I think with some of the Hendrick guys not racing, some of the Penske guys not racing, I think it opens the field up a bit more to some of the guys who've been running 8th to 10th most weeks, and that's kind of where I think Kyle Busch fits in. But a lot of great picks there. I think a lot of fans in the chat will be excited to hear to see if Dale Jr. or Jeff Gordon or one of those legends of the sports has a breakout performance here today. But that's gonna be a lot of fun. Well, we've done it. That is it. I'll turn it over to you guys for kind of final thoughts on the show, on the season, on today's race. I'll start with you, Jordan. Thanks for being here, man. And man, it's gonna be exciting to see real racing back soon. But the iRacing stuff has sure been fun.
No, it's been such a pleasure, man. And I got to say, my highlight of this whole series, I got a letter in the mail last week from a kid in 2nd grade here in Forest Acres, South Carolina, my hometown, and did an amazing job. Drew a picture of the K-Seal truck from Daytona behind me, and he talked about how much he loved watching our pre-race shows on. He said, "I love watching you on Eric Estepp's show every week with you and Rajah." And I thought that was the coolest thing, that we got some kid in 2nd grade says he wants to be a race car driver one day watching our shows. So if you're out there watching, hey bud. But I think it's been so cool to talk with you guys about iRacing, to learn more about this, the process, how big this iRacing world is. This is just such an amazing culture and family that has been so cool to learn more about as we've done the Icebox pickup throwdown and learn through that process of what it takes to broadcast these races, learning about tire models, learning about tire wear, learning about damage and the contact that go on in these races. And it's just been so cool. And I just keep going back to what we talk about every week, hopefully bringing in a new demographic of fans that wouldn't have watched NASCAR through all this. Hopefully they're out there buying themselves a Logitech wheel or some kind of sim setup and are downloading and going to be racing on iRacing soon. So it's been so cool to me. And then to hear Rajah's insight every week about these tracks and seeing him cut these laps and kind of seeing kind of into his head as he runs these places. It's just been an amazing experience for me. And I think what we've got here is really cool. And you and I were talking about this after we finished the show last week is, one thing they've talked about when we do go back racing, there's not going to be any reporters of the racetrack. Fox is going to be there covering the truck races, but there's not going to be anybody covering. So we may have to get creative when the real deal gets back. And I'm going to have my laptop with me or my phone doing a Zoom call on pit road with you guys before our truck race starts, doing our own little pre-race show for NASCAR truck racing, coming back to life, when we get back racing. But it's been a pleasure. What's your thoughts, Rajah? How have we done? Have we given iRacing justice through this whole process?
Definitely, like 100%. Being in a show of this stature with you, Jordan, being an accomplished truck driver, and Eric, building his profile from stop motion to now being essentially a NASCAR media member. Now it's been really an honor for me to be on the show with you guys, and it's been really fun. Seeing Jordan, your side of things, and kind of some of the things that I'm still trying to learn, and how some of the things on the simulator aren't replicated in real life, and what is, along with how to really speak and how to have conversation with people, and just how to reach out to fans and have an audience. And so I've really had a blast, and it's been a fun couple of weeks.
To kind of echo what Jordan said there, I feel like I have learned a lot, not just from watching the races, but probably more than anything from doing this show and talking to you, Rajah. So I really appreciate you coming on and providing your sim racing insight and expertise. But that's going to do it. Thank you, everyone who's tuned in to all of these shows. Thank you, Jordan Anderson, Rajah Caruth, for tuning in.
We can't forget, if there's any mothers out there, happy Mother's Day.
Yes.
I should have led with the show.
Mother's Day. And if you haven't bought your mom flowers yet, make sure to run out to your local Walmart or Costco or whatever's open, and make sure you buy your mom some flowers and chocolate and tell her how much you love her. If you got another lady in your life that you want to tell her happy Mother's Day, tell her. Man, hope everybody has a great weekend out there. Man, this is so cool. I hate that this is ending. We got to figure out some way to keep the trifecta together when we get back racing and doing the real thing. And it's been such a blast hanging out with you guys. Thank you for putting this all together, Eric. It's been awesome.
Thank you guys for being a part of it, and for being flexible with the schedule changing every week. And yes, of course, a very happy Mother's Day tomorrow to all of the mothers out there, and hope everyone's staying safe. Real racing is right around the corner. In fact, last night there was World of Outlaws racing back, so real racing is right around the corner, y'all. But we appreciate you all joining us for these past few weeks to watch iRacing and learn a whole lot more about this together. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you again real soon. Have a great weekend, y'all.
See you guys
later.